Have you ever imagined dying for 8 minutes and coming back with a direct message from Jesus about 4 world-changing events after July 15, 2025? In today's story, you'll meet Hannah McNeil, a woman who saw what was coming, and what she reveals is hair-raising. If you feel like something big is about to happen, watch until the end. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment here which city you're watching from. I shouldn't even be alive right now. What I'm about to tell you sounds like a movie script, but I took for 8 minutes. And in those 8 minutes, Jesus showed me the 4 events that will begin to change the United States starting July 15, 2025. He said to me, "Speak, even if they doubt, because the signs have already begun." My name is Hannah McNeil. I'm 38 years old and I live in Colorado Springs. I'm a nurse. I'm not religious. I never had these visions. I believed in science. But what happened to me that day, July 15, 2025, made me rethink everything. I died, and I knew what's coming. A very strange storm was beginning. The sky seemed inflamed. It had colors I'd never seen before, as if the sky were burning from the inside out. It gave me agony, a chill that not even the July summer could warm. The trees around my house began to lean in the same direction, even though there was no wind. I went to the backyard to pick up some of my son's toys before the rain started, and then everything happened at once. The noise stopped, the air grew heavy, and a white flash came down from the sky. It didn't look like lightning. It was a straight, solid column of light, as if the sky had pulled me up. I was later told I had a massive cardiac arrest. My neighbor, a paramedic, tried to revive me, but according to him, my heart stopped for exactly 8 minutes and 13 seconds. But what matters is what happened while my heart was stopped. I didn't see a tunnel, nor light at the end. First, I saw total silence, as if the universe had paused just to hear me. Then I felt something tugging at me, not from the outside, but from the inside. It was as if my soul had been ripped out with surgical precision. It didn't hurt, but it was so strong that I'm at a loss for words. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my backyard. I was in a field that breathed. Literally, the ground pulsed. The sky seemed to expand and contract like a huge lung. And there, in the center of this surreal place, he was, Jesus, standing, without saying anything, just looking into my eyes. And in that look, I understood that he knew everything. Everything I hid, everything that destroyed me, everything I didn't even tell myself. I tried to ask if I had died. He answered before I could open my mouth, "You died, but now you'll see why." Then he raised his hand, and 4 beams of light appeared in the sky like columns. Each one trembled as if it were holding something gigantic inside. Jesus looked at me and said, "What happens after July 15th will not be avoided, but it will be understood. Watch." The light around us began to bend, as if the air itself were bending. Jesus said nothing more. He simply pointed to the first column of light. When I looked, it split open, like a floating screen cut from the inside out. And what I saw wasn't the future, it was sleeping memory. We were now in an ordinary American town, houses with white picket fences, cars in garages, people walking down the street like any other day. But the sky above held something wrong. A silent line of light was opening, right in the middle of the blue. It wasn't lightning, it wasn't aurora, it was like a scar of light being sewn back together. Jesus said something to me without moving his lips. This will happen in silence. It will not be heard, but it will be sensed. Suddenly, everything froze. People stopped in mid-step, mothers pushing strollers, young people on cell phones, workers heading to the night shift. Everything stopped, and then, as if obeying an invisible command, everyone looked at the sky at the same time, and what I saw was chilling. Some cried without understanding why. Others fell to their knees as if a presence had invaded them from within. Some laughed like little children, and no one said a word. Why the sky was speaking inside. I asked Jesus, "Is this the rapture?" He shook his head. "No, it is the call before awakening. Not everyone will understand, but everyone will feel." This vision lasted seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When everything returned to normal, I realized nothing would ever be normal again. He looked at me and said, "This will be the first event, a crack in the veil, a call for those who have forgotten to remember. Some will ignore it, others will wake up crying without knowing why." And then something terrifying happened. I saw a calendar floating in the air, and the date July 16, 2025 flashed red. It was the day after my death. The crack would begin then, invisible to the eyes, but relentless to the soul. The light from the first column slowly faded, like a lighthouse that had served its purpose. I was in shock, but there was no time to pause. Jesus looked at me with calm urgency and pointed to the second column. He didn't say, "Get ready." He just said, "Now, see what happens when your knees touch the ground." The second column of light opened as if made of water and memory. Everything spun around me, and in the blink of an eye, I was hovering over a map of the United States. But it was no ordinary map. It was made of light, a living, vibrating network. The cities looked like stars. Some shone brightly, others barely twinkled. And then I saw it. Blue dots began to appear in unlikely places. Small towns, forgotten villages, neighborhoods forgotten in the news. Jesus spoke to the depths of my soul. These are the ones who still pray. Each blue dot represented someone who still prayed in secret, kneeling on the bedroom floor, crying softly into the steering wheel of the car, whispering, "Help me," with his eyes closed. They were voices that no one heard, but heaven heard them all. And then, the dots started to connect, as if invisible threads were stitching together distant hearts. Lines of energy spread out, creating a glowing blue web, like rays connecting the invisibles. And when the network was completed, the entire map shone like a silent explosion of collective faith. They are the intercessors, Jesus told me. They have no pulpit, no audience, but they sustain the world with what no one sees. I saw real scenes, people praying in laundromats, garages, hospital rooms, prisons, even in the countryside. No one was in charge. It wasn't religion, it was living memory. A man in a wheelchair held a Bible with pages missing. A young woman with shaved hair cried on the bathroom floor, saying, "I can't take it anymore, but I know you hear me." These prayers, these whispered pains, they were lighting up the whole country. But then I saw something stronger. Empty churches with microphones on, but no sound. And next to it, fields full of people praying in silence. Jesus said, "The stage went silent. The flame returned to the houses." I asked, "Do they know they are connected?" He said, "Not yet, but they will. When heaven answers, they will realize they never prayed alone." And at that moment, the column of light intensified. I saw a child, just 8 years old, praying over a map of the United States with crayons beside it. And when she touched the state of Kansas with her finger, a light exploded at that point on the map. Jesus looked at me tenderly and said, "The prayer of little ones is worth more than 1,000 empty speeches." And then he pointed to the third column. There was something dense there, a weight, a return. Now, you will see what happens when the truth stops being silent. The third column of light trembled as if it were alive, but tired. When it parted, I was transported to the edge of a vast river. I recognized the place immediately, of the Mississippi River, but there was something wrong. The current was inverted. The river no longer flowed south. It was coming back, rising against its own nature. I watched, confused, Bjorn, as the water swept away logs, debris, pieces of history that seemed forgotten. Jesus was beside me, and with a voice that echoed within me, he said, "That's the truth. She was contained, but now she's going to return." And then, the waters began to speak, not with words, but with ancient voices that rose like hymns, voices of silenced women, erased peoples, children who were never heard. Each drop of water seemed to contain a buried memory. The river was returning everything that was covered. I saw faces, people who had been erased from history, forgotten martyrs, prophets unheard, censored writers. I saw newspapers crumbling into the water, TV screens cracking from the inside out, social media shattering like broken glass. The lies were drowning. Jesus spoke seriously. Truth doesn't need to be defended. It just waits for its time to return. And that's exactly what I saw. An entire generation opening its eyes, not because of sermons, but because something inside them said, "This here is no longer true." And they began to search, not in temples, but in essence. That's when the kids showed up. They entered the river without fear, walking against the current, as if they knew the river recognized them. Each step made the water sparkle. Jesus showed me a teenage girl with an afro, lifting a stone from the riverbed. Beneath it lay a scroll with gold letters. When she opened it, words appeared in forgotten languages, but understood by the soul. "They will carry the truth without needing to prove it," said Jesus, "and no one will be able to stop them." I saw a conference room full of leaders arguing, shouting, defending their versions of events. And then a girl came in alone and said just one sentence. Everything went silent, because the truth spoken with purity has the power to silence all pride. At that moment, the river exploded with light, and a wind began to blow against me. It signaled the end of the vision. I felt tears welling up, not out of sadness, but because the lie of the world had lost its breath. Jesus looked at me, eyes shining, and said, "Now prepare yourself. The fourth event will not come with words. It will come with fire, of gold." As Jesus pointed to the fourth and final column of light, the atmosphere around us changed abruptly. The sky darkened, but it wasn't night. It was as if the world held its breath before something sacred happened. Then, the light opened, and the sky began to cry. But it wasn't water, it was gold. Golden drops fell from the sky in slow motion. I saw an American city. It looked like Atlanta, but it wasn't exactly her. It was as if the city were mirrored in the spirit world. The wet streets reflected the gold like living mirrors. The drops didn't hit the ground with a sound. They melted on everything they touched. Cracked roofs mended, shattered windows mended. Sick people rose, wide-eyed, but not everyone was being touched. And there, I saw why. Some people stretched their hands towards the sky, but the gold passed through his fingers like smoke. Fear, greed, hatred, shame. These things created a kind of invisible layer, and the gold didn't stick to them. Others looked like human lanterns. Children, the elderly, people praying in silence, couples reconciling, strangers helping each other. These shone, and when the golden rain touched them, it dressed them like cloaks of light. Jesus spoke in a firm, sweet voice. "This is not prosperity. It is clarity. This is the reign of restoration. It will not be hoarded, only shared." I saw churches with their doors open, but not for worship. They were filled with food, blankets, and musical instruments. I saw doctors providing free care. I saw people opening their homes to strangers. And there, the rain fell harder. Suddenly, a blind man began to see, not just physically, but spiritually. He walked to a coffee shop, sat down across from someone he had never seen before, and said, "I was taught to hate you, but now I remember. You were my brother before this life." And then gold fell even harder. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or scream. Jesus just whispered, "Between July and September, the rain will come. Hearts open to acknowledge, forgive, and surrender will be covered." It was at that moment that I understood. It wasn't wealth that was coming. It was liquid truth, light in the form of compassion, a kind of provision that no economy in the world can foresee. And when I looked up, I saw words written in the rain itself. "It's not meant to be kept. It's meant to be passed on." Jesus gently held my arm. The light from the 4 columns began to fade, and I asked, "So, it's over?" He shook his head. "Now comes the most important moment. Time will not be destroyed. It will be reversed." After the last column was extinguished, Jesus took me to a place where time seemed to breathe. There was no sky, no ground, just a pulsing golden immensity. In the center of this living void, a huge clock floated, suspended in the air like an ancient throne forgotten in space. But something stopped me. The hands were going backwards. I tried to understand what I saw. The display didn't just have numbers. It displayed symbols, flames, rivers, wings, eyes. Some I recognized instinctively. Others gave me chills, as if they were secrets humanity had forgotten. "Why is time going backwards?" I asked, without moving my lips. Jesus responded with a look that pierced the soul. "Because the future needs a balanced past, and heaven's justice is not revenge, it is completeness." And then the visions began. Historical moments being rewound, women being silenced, entire cultures burned, honest voices destroyed by systems of control. And then, I saw something incredible. Those same souls returning, but not as martyrs. They returned as children, with eyes full of light, being born in unlikely places. I saw a baby being born in a poor village in Mexico. I saw another in a Detroit hospital, a third in a remote village in India. These children were echoes of ancient souls, and each one carried a silenced truth, a buried gift, an unfinished song. I asked, "Is it reincarnation?" Jesus smiled lightly and said, "Not exactly. It's restoration. The soul doesn't come back to repeat. It comes back to complete." As the clock hands turned back, I saw keys falling into place, lives crossing time, mistakes being gently corrected, false stories falling to the ground, everything that was distorted being redirected to the truth. Then the hands stopped. An intense glow took over the clock, which started counting forward again, but not with numbers, with names. Names I didn't know, but that made me cry just hearing them. "These are next," Jesus said. "Those who will wake up to the golden rain, those who will break cycles with silence, those who will seek not fame but completeness." I felt a chill so deep I almost collapsed, because in that moment I understood, time is not running out. It is being corrected, redeemed, realigned with heaven. Jesus approached the clock. He touched its center with a finger of light. A door opened, in the air, without hinges, without structure, just vibration. He looked at me and said, "What you will see now is between worlds, and only those who listen in the Spirit will understand." The open door before us seemed made of liquid air. As we stepped through, I felt as if every part of me was being scanned, not with machines, but with memory. It was as if the place recognized me. We entered Infinite Hall, silent, sacred. It looked like a library, but there were no books. There were orbs of light floating, each with a unique pulse, some more intense, others soft as a sigh. "What is this place?" I asked with a trembling soul. Jesus answered, "It is the room of those ready to return. Each light is a soul. Some choose, others are sent, but none are forgotten." I approached one of the orbs. As I touched it, a vision opened before me. A woman with deep-set eyes, holding a baby and painting a cosmic landscape with a brush made of stars. The image pulsed with life, then disappeared. Jesus explained, "This soul will bring beauty where the world has turned gray." I passed other orbs. One of them shone so brightly that it made me flinch. "This one is scheduled to enter Earth on July 19th. I stopped. That date cut me to the core. "That's my niece's due date," I whispered, choking. Jesus smiled as if he already knew. "So now you understand why you came." I saw souls who had been waiting for centuries for the right moment. I saw others who had returned dozens of times, always in cycles of healing. But they all had one thing in common, an urgency to complete what had been interrupted. Jesus spoke reverently. "Every birth is a divine appointment. Every life, an answer. No soul is here by chance." I looked around and realized, these souls are the agents of restoration, those who will carry the hidden truths, the forgotten gifts, the songs never sung. I saw orbs coming together, as if they were families of souls, ready to meet again in another time in other bodies. I asked, "What if a soul refuses to return?" Jesus responded with pure love. "She won't be forced, but she will feel the call until everything is complete. The longing for what she hasn't yet experienced will bring her back." The tears flowed without me realizing it. The grandeur of this place was too much to contain. It wasn't heaven. It wasn't the afterlife. It was the threshold, the exact point between eternity and the new chance. And when I looked back, I saw that the door was still open. Jesus looked at me and said, "Now it's time for you to see what your return has activated, because the earth is already listening and responding." When we left that room of souls, something was different. The space around us vibrated. It was as if the world was in silent expectation, like the second before the thunder. And it was then that Jesus took me to a place that looked like a mirror of the earth, but made of living energy. There, I would see the spiritual responses being activated after the 4 events. We floated over American cities. I recognized skylines that looked like Houston, Charlotte, Sacramento, but they weren't exactly the same. They were versions truer of them, as if each city had a soul, and now those souls were waking up. And then I saw it. Houses with lights that didn't come from electricity. They were internal lights, from waking consciousness. People were getting up in the early hours of the morning, alone, without an alarm, at 3:33 a.m. Some were crying, others were simply kneeling, as if they felt something without knowing what it was. I saw mothers with children in their arms, saying, "I don't know why I'm praying, but I feel like I need to." I saw men breaking old cycles with a single sincere apology. Jesus said to me, "They don't know it yet, but heaven has already begun to measure hearts." Then I saw something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Between July 16th and 22nd, multitudes faced seemingly ordinary decisions: changing jobs, accepting a reconciliation request, selling a house, ending a relationship, saying no for the first time. But each choice was shrouded in light or mist. "They will not choose with their minds," Jesus said, "but with peace. That which calls them lightly is the path. That which holds them back with fear is illusion." And I saw clearly, people with lost looks, stopped in the middle of their routines, having very strong intuitions, as if the sky were screaming in whispers. Some obeyed, others hesitated, and some chose what was most familiar, even if it hurt. I asked, "And those who choose wrongly?" Jesus responded with overwhelming love, "They won't be punished, but they will feel disoriented until they remember who they are." And in that instant, I saw entire families kneeling together, people opening their Bibles after years, neighbors gathering in silence, not to hold meetings, but to listen, just listen, as if the sound of God were between the lines of reality. A mother prayed for her son who had wandered away. An elderly man with Alzheimer's said the name of Jesus clearly for the first time in months. A young woman who had tried to kill herself the week before looked up to the sky and said, "If you still want me here, then show me." And the sky answered, not with voice, but with heat, with wind, certainly without words. Jesus then looked at me and said, "The door will be opened for 7 days. Those who enter in truth will leave in deliverance." And there, I understood, heaven was closer than ever, not up high, but between us. After showing me the 7 opening nights, Jesus took me to what he called the turning point. The space around us contracted, as if time itself were about to take a step. Before us appeared something that seemed to have been taken from another era, a colossal clock tower, made of living stone and glass that shone like a wet diamond. But this clock didn't tell time. It told stages of the collective soul. Jesus said to me, "You will now hear the sound that precedes the turning point, the signal that the world will try to ignore, but that the awakened will recognize." Suddenly, the bells in the tower began to ring, but each chime wasn't just a sound. It was an echo in the soul. I felt vibrations running through my chest, as if old memories I had never experienced were being awakened. As the bells rang, I saw quick visions, like flashes. A man tearing up secret documents in Washington and crying. A judge looking at a child in a trial and choosing compassion over the law. A police officer taking off his badge and asking for forgiveness from a young black man in front of a police station. And then Jesus explained to me, "These sounds are aligning hearts. Every choice made in truth now will echo for generations." Then I saw one invisible line being drawn over the map of America, going from east to west, like a seam of light crossing the country's cracks. The line passed through communities, schools, hospitals, churches, prisons, and wherever it passed, people fell to their knees, without knowing why. And then, the children appeared again. Only this time, they were not receiving. They were teaching. I saw a 10-year-old girl of Asian descent teaching adults to release fear with a song in a language no one knew, but everyone understood. An autistic boy, silent all his life, stood up and said, "He's here, behind the curtain of pain, waiting for someone to say yes." Jesus looked at me and said something that broke me inside and healed me at the same time. These are the new builders. They don't care about titles. They don't wait for platforms. They just know. But then came the strongest vision. A teenage girl entering a room where religious and political leaders were arguing, shouting at each other. She stood in their midst and said a single sentence. I could not hear with my ears, but my soul understood, and everyone were silent, not out of fear, but because the truth within her voice made every lie crumble. Jesus said to me, "The new generation does not come to destroy, it comes to remember." And in that moment, the clock tower glowed gold and began to dissolve into particles of light. It was the end of the count. Jesus then stretched out his hand and said, "Now, come see how love ends everything, to begin again." The tower disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, I was back in first place. the garden that breathed. But now, something had changed. The air seemed thicker, more full of presence, as if heaven itself was waiting for my answer. Jesus was beside me. His eyes did not ask, did not command. They invited. He pointed to a golden hill in the distance. At the top was a gate made of pure light in motion, as if memories were flowing within him. That's the threshold. If you cross it, you won't come back. I trembled. The weight of choice swallowed me, not because I was afraid of death, but because, for the first time in my life, I knew how sacred living was. Before I could speak, Jesus touched my forehead with 2 fingers. The moment he did so, all the visions came back at once. The 4 events, the children, the returning souls, the gold descending from the sky, the clocks, the line on the map, the intercessors, the rain, the reversal, and then, with a voice that was not sound, it was vibration in the form of tenderness, he said to me, "You won't come back to convince, you'll come back to remember, to light what's already lit in others." I started crying, not because of what I was leaving, but for what he now knew he carried. I saw my body, down there, on a sodden lawn, with neighbors running, an ambulance arriving. I was pale, dead, for 8 minutes and 13 seconds. But now, with a lightness that no explanation can reach, Jesus said, "What you saw are seeds. Some will sprout in silence, others in a storm, but all will blossom." I looked at my hands. There were words written on them, not with ink, but with light. Words I understood without having to read. They were inside me before I was born. Jesus smiled. "You were sent with this memory. You just needed to die, to remember." I took a deep breath, and it was as if the universe itself had been waiting for that breath. "I'm ready," I said. "Then wake up." A strong wind pulled me back, a tunnel of light, a tremor in my spirit, and then my eyes opened. I was lying on the grass, drenched in rain, with someone shaking me and screaming, "Hannah, Hannah." My God, she's alive. But I already knew that. I hadn't just survived. I had been sent back. And since then, something has changed. The world is the same, but doesn't sound the same. I hear things in the silence. I sense patterns in gestures. Streetlights flicker as I pass. Animals follow me as if they recognize my frequency. And dreams. My dreams are like windows into that room of souls. Jesus still speaks, not with a voice, with presence. And every time I think about giving up, I hear that phrase again. You didn't come back to prove it. You came back to remember. And those who share the same light will recognize yours. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.